this is an example of our function rule and function notation constructed response problem. So this problem says, suppose you borrow $1,000 to buy used DJ equipment from your dad. You charge $75 for each party that you DJ. Use the information to answer the following. First of all, write a function rule that represents your profit as a function of the number of parties you DJ. So since these are the two pieces that they're asking us to write a function rule to represent, they're going to represent there are two unknown pieces, so they will represent our variables. And since we will, if you think about it logically, we would use the number of parties that we've DJ'd in order to determine how much money we make. That means that our independent variable will represent our number of parties, so we'll just let n represent the number of parties. And since we're going to use the number of parties to determine our profit, we're going to let our dependent variable be profit. Okay, we now want to write a function rule that represents this situation. So, since profit is our dependent variable, it will go by itself on one side of our equation. And we have two pieces of information to think about: the amount of money that we're making and the amount of money that we still have to pay back to our dad. So, let's start with the amount of money that we're making. Since it says up top we are charging $75 for each party, again, if we take the value per item, or $75 per party, and we multiply by our number of parties, n, this now represents the amount of money we make from DJing n parties. However, we don't get to keep all that money because we need to pay back dad, so from there we need to subtract away the $1,000 that we owe. This will give us now our function rule or equation that represents this situation, and if the problem asked us instead to write this using function notation, we can write it instead as P of n, or the profit given the number of parties we DJ, equals 75n minus 1,000. So still the same information and expression on the right-hand side, but just a slightly different notation. And again, that's called function notation. So from there, we now are going to go through and we are going to plug in each of these numbers in order to find out how much money we make or what our profit would be. And again, we expect some of the values could possibly come out negative because we know we have to pay back that $1,000 to our dad, and that's not going to happen with just one party being DJ'd. So we can now simply take our 75 times our number of parties, which is 1, and then subtract 1,000 from that. And for our first value in our table, you should be able to see that we are going to end up with negative $925, or negative 925. Right? After that, we can now plug in 5 as our number of parties, and we're getting a little closer now. We would end up getting back negative 625 by plugging 5 into our equation from part A for our n. Next, if we go down and plug 15 into this same equation, we now come out with a positive 125. And finally, if we plug 20 into this equation, we will come out with $500. All right, the last part, very similar to part B. They're now asking us to determine our profit after DJing 50 parties. And again, in a table situation like part B, you usually can just plug in and then put your values in there. Anytime they give you space, like in part C, to show work, you're going to want to show any work you can for this problem. So we're going to simply take our equation that P is equal to 75n minus 1,000. And now using the information, since it says 50 parties, we know n is going to be equal to 50. And if we plug that into our equation, we'll end up with P is equal to 75 times 50 minus 1,000. So if we now simplify, our 75 times 50 is going to end up giving you back 3,750. And if we now subtract our 1,000 from there, we would find out that our profit is equal to 2,750. So again, we should always write our answer out in a sentence using appropriate units. After DJing 50 parties, your profit, again, since we're talking about money, our appropriate unit would be dollars. Your profit, let's make this an actual sentence that makes sense, is $2,750. And this is an example of one of our function rule constructed response type problems.